so much for the invitation. To me, as you said, my journey also starts with the cinema, which I think my concept is also to travel with my product in a different way. That's another personal way of looking at how to address the culture and the journey to the different parts of this. Probably one of the journey we started is only a little bit about a century ago, 100 years before the cinema discovered. That's one of the, if you look at the part of the culture, part of taking this idea of the culture to many people, many places abroad or anywhere in any part of the world, probably I discovered that it is most important part is the science that made us to travel. The part of the communications, part of seeing the same way what we see here in chopping probably the four corners and what you wanted to see and what you wanted to show them. That's one of the magic for any filmmakers, any part of the world. What you wanted to tell, and probably, unlike alphabets, if you look at the alphabets, probably what is that? It's a visual interpretations of what I would rather call the sound. If I say ah, it is in Hindi or Tamil or Malayalam, you have 3 different or 4 different alphabets for that matter. That's extremely, if you look at that's the visual interpretation of the same sound. So is cinema. So therefore, the sound is being transferred into the alphabets, probably a language. Then it is been transformed into how the visual media is been, after the science has been discovered, probably how we can really interpret the images into another kind of emotions. So therefore, there's a huge value for all of us to understand what is emotion through the images. If you look at the total archives of cinema, it's a reflection of the emotions from that period to the current period. No other media could be able to conceive that imageries, the imageries of emotions within that concept to archive that emotion. If you see a film 100 years ago, to weep and time to laugh, they are different. And now, if you look at the current time also, they are different. How the progression, it's been emotionally documented through the ideas of images. If you look at that way, it's vice versa, the emotion versus the visual interpretations. Now, I just wanted to interpret in a different way, particularly how, basically, if you debate our emotions or how the way the human beings particularly, when it comes to the pyramid form, what is the culture? If you look at the culture, let us divide into 4 parts. First, of course, Mr. Charya must be knowing what is the matter, the life, and probably the mind after that. Then after the mind, what is the culture? I think the matter, like any other physical properties, like when you say, I would rather say, it's like a black mass, big explosions. When you exploded from the black body, that's particularly the matter. When you explode it, and then it became a small little medium of an energy, a small particle probably, there actually developed the space and time. The space comes after the explosions, and time also conceived from that small explosions. And cinema is also related to that, space and time. So it has been really related to that element, space and time. That first black body explosion really given us an idea of what is space and what is time. Then from there, this matter, probably from the matter, which is, we don't know the matter always related, we know physics, chemistry, and mathematics, and astronomy, and even astrology for that matter. If you combine it together, then probably the physical interpretation of this matter uniting together, probably the life was developed, the water was developed, and then the chemical reactions, probably the life must have developed. From the life, if you look at the life part of it, then the behavior pattern started, the animal behavior pattern, and or anything that related with the mind, the life, there is a mind. There also, there is a space, which I would trust. There is also time. From that mind, from the life, you made a mind. That mind has really developed two objects in space. The time to react, the time to understand, the way you behave it, these are part of it. And we can, generally, if you call it as animal behavior, how the animals are behaving to the nature, the rain, the surrounding, the wind, these are interrelated with every object. All the objects, if you look at it. And if you look at that object, then I would rather say, then the culture came. What is the difference between, we say the animal behaves different, and then the culture starts differently. The culture is totally different because of, then we looked at the society, people around, that's what we call human, or unlike a human. That's what we probably will try to explain that thing. So the human values has been considered based on the culture. Based on the culture, it generally, as explained here earlier, I would rather it changes from terrain to terrain, and nation to nation, location to location. And it happens related to dialectical also, from one places to there. So behavior pattern is generally conceived. There, I think the mind, which again related, we all know that we always derived another form called psychology. The psychology part of it, we never know what is the actual interpretation. So many people interpreted psychology in a different ways. Even Freud also explained psychology. But there is not basis of that thing. These are general terms for us. But for cinema, that's what I just wanted to. How do these, putting all these matters, because the physical matter as well as the emotional matter and the concept of the life and the culture, putting it together, I think this way of looking from different angles, I would rather, is the sixth sense. The sixth or the fourth dimension, or even now the fifth dimension probably, which we always call it, in which way we wanted to look all this matter, all this life, all this way of looking the behaviors, and then based on the certain cultures, and that is, to sum up, that is cinema for all of us. And that's one of the reasons, I think my cinema, when you travel to Brazil, or when we travel to Stockholm, or any part of the places, I think it is there where we communicate in a different sensibilities. So we understand them. So the mind also, as psychologically we related to, I think that interpretations of mind from different nations to different nations, still understanding the emotions in a finer and micro level, is the interpretations of a author. That's the author, when it takes the image of the cinema, I think we have a huge responsibility to understand, as I said, how do we understand the sound into the alphabets, and then alphabet turning into emotional content. When we discovered the language, why we discovered the language, what is the reason for discovering the language, if you look at it? Because human beings always try to clear and try to explain their emotions. They argued for it, they emphasized for it, they wanted to establish it also, so the language became very important tool for that thing. That's why, so the language became more, then they argue for that thing. They try to interpret for that thing. That's one of the reasons, I think, the language, and then the emotional content is strictly available. If you look at the number of alphabets, that is probably Tamil has originally 14 alphabets. If you look, and we have more than 50, and then English has more 24. If you look at the development of the number of alphabets, you can see the age of the language. So here, if you sharply debate it, and when the language comes, then the social consciousness comes. The social interpretation of the consciousness, that's why we say how they live, how they cluster it, how they share their values. This is all shared through the spoken words. But after the last 100 years before, when the camera was discovered, when the image can be stored, it can be reproduced, and can be moved, and it can be explained from the certain kind of space and time. That's where the space and time, I always explain, it's like a very primitive, like a gene. It's a gene for the cinema, that is space and time. Like for the life, it is a gene, probably for the matter, it is indivisible atoms. So therefore, this has been placed together, this space and time, the concept of time and space is being interpreted, or rather understood, or trying to understand. But there comes the emotional part of it. There comes the relationships. There comes the understanding what is father, what is mother, what is your friend, what is your love, what is your imageries. There again, when I look at it that way, there is a concept of past tense, present tense, then future tense. A very simple example is the pleasure, concept of the pleasure, and how you document it. What is the pleasure? There is a pleasure, for the pleasure, very simple idea of pleasure, there is 3 tenses, if you see it. What is the idea of the past? As he said, he was explaining about the travel. He went into the terrain, mountains, and then came back. Now it is a pleasure. At this moment, it is a pleasure. And what is the pleasure of present tense? If you look at it, eating the food, it's a pleasure. You just eat, you don't get that, you can say that you can't explain that thing. That is the present concept of the pleasure. And what is the future tense of the pleasure? There must be the concept of sex. It may not happen the same way, but it is a pleasure of identifying it. So there are tenses. What I wanted to explain this thing, probably to explain this one, is there is a space in it. There's a time in it. That's what I just wanted to tell. So there is a space, there is a time. If you look at the very beginning of the formation of the world, or the formation of a matter, what we said, the black body, which is an explosion where the space is being discovered, or the time is also being discovered. So therefore, in human mind also, we have the same relationship which is happening now. That is the beauty part of it. Therefore, we move in a cycle which we redefine as the concept of a future. We also interpreted concept of the present. Therefore, we have a future also. That's what it is happening now. In cinema, and if you look at it, this is the only media where science challenged. See, the second ahead of us the science says that time is moving. You cannot rediscover back. But in film, we can reverse the process. A person who is drinking the water can be returned the water back to the glass. It is a reverse process. And science is not able to say. Emotionally, you can reverse it. Visually, you can reverse it. Therefore, the time could be able to be reversed in 2 of the images, which is possible. Therefore, no science, nowhere that the time could not be reversed. It can be brought back. What is the past? We know that psychologists, philosophers said, every second you are dying. That particular second you want to return back. But in image concept, you can return it back, which is very important for the emotional content. And you see Prime Nasir, you see Satyan now, and many of the filmmakers, and their creations. And you still them, they are in alive. What does it matter? It matters a lot for the society. That's where the bonding is happening. And we know the people, there is a documentation, there is a perspective, there is a storytelling, there is a experimentations, and there is a science fictions, and there, ahead of time, the subjects really varies before the imageries. Many of the metaphors, many of the areas which I just wish to say that for example, the design factor of the many of the spaceships. Actually, it has been designed by an art director in 2001 Odyssey. Yes, the director designed the concept, and is still following it. So it is an image of the future which has been recovered ages back, how you look at it, what is the image, on the understanding, the way you look at it, the way you understood. The spaceship, along with the space, the man who is wearing that costumes, probably, and still it continues from the cinema. Cinema has inspired many people to wear what you want, the way you want it to look, and the way you wanted to purchase it. And many of the advertisements probably, and I always make a little fun of the advertisements, say you give a product, you should buy it. The most intelligent person, the mind it functions is make the audience fool. Then, therefore, they can buy it. So so you have to keep certain value of mindset. If you are intelligent, you don't want or not want, but they are able to convince you that it's very easily they can convince you that you can buy it. So where is the mindset of the person who wanted to tell, and where is the person who wanted the customer or the consumer to buy it? So where the mindsets can happen. It's all done on the visual level, visual imageries. So keeping a lot of people below certain intelligence is the concept of a product to sell it, to advertise it. Therefore, the image has a strong control over it. That's what the cinema is, a manipulation. It's a huge manipulation. It's a big lie, according to me. The way you wanted to tell the lie is a huge manipulation. We reconstruct, we think about it, how to say a lie in a very truthful manner. This is a concept for any filmmaker to tell a story, to make them understand the time which he gets is 2 hours, but he has to tell an epic time which is happening a span of 2,000 years within 2 hours. That is his job. So the time matter concept, which is possible only through the images derived where the science become more responsible. So, and in the end, which I wanted to say, the fine duty of the science is to entertain people with emotionally, where cinema was possible, sheer because of that thing. Science really crafted to make the world together, to see them, to understand. World would have been totally different if there was no cinema. Totally different. Like in India, which I always say, if there were no trains, initially, India would have been different. So happened that the British made the trains together. So culturally we transfer, we moved together, and finally, when the British came here, India were different. And when we wanted India for a freedom, the British people asked, which India? When they came, it was different. But the train made it together. So cinema makes India together, makes the world together. That's what the beauty of the emotion, I would say. Cinema, what I say, it's a very subjective explanation. But to make the world shrink together within certain fraction of a second, within the concept of a second, I think the art of cinema really influenced the human mind in such a shorter times to understand it. That's the beauty where I belong it. Thank you for.